Just like in the main series Pokemon games, Pokemon Sleep has a nature system. Nature's providing boons and banes to your various stats. Unlike in the main series games, though, the stats that are modified in Pokemon Sleep aren't exactly clear as far as what they're affecting. So I decided to simplify the whole process for you guys with the Pokemon Sleep Nature's Simplified guide here. And at the end of the video, I'll also provide my recommendations as far as which kind of Pokemon want what kind of natures. So starting out, we have Speed of Help. A Speed of Help boon gives a 10% bonus to your Pokemon's frequency. Frequency is how often your Pokemon will collect berries and ingredients. You can see your frequency in-app, and if your Pokemon has a boon or a bane to its Speed of Help, you can also see that change in its base frequency in-app as well, compared to what their frequency ought to be at that level if they didn't have a change to their Speed of Help. So overall, a boon to your Speed of Help is pretty much always good. Pokemon would love to have this, and having a bane to your Speed of Help is almost always bad because it lowers your frequency. Next we have Energy. An energy boon provides a 20% bonus to the amount of energy your Pokemon gets from sleeping. Now, this is kind of a pointless boon because if you sleep for the 100%, then your Pokemon go up to 100% energy anyways. You can't overcap on energy, so there is no real benefit to having that 20% bonus. The only time having a boon in energy seems to matter is if the game hates you, like it hates me, and even though you went to bed at 10 p.m., the game says you went to bed at 1 a.m., so you only get like 60% energy instead of 100% energy. In that scenario, having an energy boon would be helpful. But in most cases, having the energy boon is kind of wasteful. I'd say overall it's often bad because if you have an energy boon, then you're going to have to take a bane in another stat. On the flip side, an energy bane is also pretty bad. Basically, energy gives a bonus to your frequency. If you're at 100% energy, that's a 2 times multiplier to your frequency. And it scales down throughout the day to 0% energy, which is just your baseline frequency. So the higher energy you have, the more often your Pokemon's going to be collecting things. And having that 20% decrease, having 80% energy instead of 100% energy, the net effect on your frequency throughout the day comes out to be roughly 9%. So it's not as bad as having a bane in Speed of Help, but it is kind of equivalent to having a bane in Speed of Help if you have a bane to the energy. Now another thing to add to this is that there are some sub skills and main skills that can mitigate having that lower energy, so it can be offset. So I'd say all things considered, you'd much rather have an energy bane instead of a Speed of Help bane, but overall having an energy bane is definitely unideal. Then we have ingredient finding. Ingredient finding is probably one of the more fun ones to think about. It gives you either a 20% multiplier or a 10% additive bonus to your Pokemon's ability to find ingredients. Basically, whenever your Pokemon hits frequency, you have a chance to either get berries or ingredients. And the ratio is about 4-to-1 in favor of berries. So having this increased chance to get ingredients means that your Pokemon could collect ingredients more often than they would otherwise. Now I say it's a 20% multiplier or a 10% additive bonus because it's not really clear in app what the effect is. I've been tracking my gameplay for a couple weeks now, and you know, a 20% multiplier to 25% and a 10% additive bonus to 25%, they come out looking pretty similar. So it's not exactly easy to tell. The reason why I'm kind of leaning on the 10% additive bonus though is because if you have a bane in ingredient finding, it seems to brick your ingredient finding pretty hard. So if you had a 20% multiplier decreasing 25%, that's not as harsh as having 10% subtracted from 25%. And yeah, my ingredient finding bane Bulbasaur, bless its soul, I hate the thing, really only seems to collect ingredients at about like 11 to 15% compared to its ability to get berries. So I'd say if your Pokemon's an ingredient finding Pokemon, they absolutely do not want to have a bane in ingredient finding because chances are they're really not going to get any more ingredients. Conversely, if you're berry finding Pokemon or any Pokemon that can collect 2 berries at a time, maybe they have the Berry Finder S sub skill, having a Bane in ingredient finding can be a benefit to them. Because if you're on a Snorlax bonus berry week, which is when you're going to be using your double berry Pokemon anyways, well then the berries can outscore the ingredients. To add to that, when you hit your carrying capacity on your Pokemon, you still roll for berries or ingredients. If you roll for ingredients under that circumstance, you throw the ingredients away. You don't get them. It doesn't help your score at all. But if you roll berries, then the berries automatically get fed to Snorlax. That's why sometimes when you open up the app, it'll say like Pikachu gave 1,000 points to your Snorlax while you were away. Those are all the berries that it was feeding the Snorlax after it hit its carrying capacity. So if you hit the carrying capacity, rolling berries more than ingredients is going to be better than rolling for ingredients, because you can actually use those for points instead of getting no points. So overall, having a boon to ingredient finding is generally good for everything, like each type of Pokemon. Probably slightly worse for the berry finders, because you're going to use the berry finders on a bonus week, which means that the berries are going to outscore the ingredients most of the time. But generally, having ingredient finding as your boon is pretty good. Having it as your bane, though, well, if you're an ingredient finding Pokemon, I think that's an absolute deal breaker. You probably want to find another one of those species that doesn't have an ingredient finding bane. And if you have an ingredient finding bane on your berry Pokemon, then that's generally a positive thing, because, well, they mostly want to just collect the berries, right? Then moving on to a more simple one, we have experience. Experience is a 20% multiplier to the experience that your Pokemon gains from sleeping. So if you sleep for 100% score, you get 100% EXP, 100 EXP. So if you got the boon, it's 120. If you got the bane, it's 80. Now, this might seem like it's a big deal because it means your Pokemon can level up faster or more slowly because of this nature effect, but overall it's pretty benign, because, you know, it doesn't really affect your performance as much as like a speed of help change would, for example. And the difference in level between an EXP boon and an EXP bane Pokemon really isn't that dramatic, especially when you consider that you can make up for these levels lost in candy. And given that each level isn't just 100 EXP, it kind of ramps up over time. The net effect that this is going to have on your Pokemon over the weeks and months of you playing this game is going to be pretty negligible. And then to just top it all off, usually we're replacing our Pokemon with Pokemon that have better natures and better sub-skills as we go forward in the game. And yeah, so your EXP boon Pokemon might not even be your ride or die until the end of the game, so that net effect doesn't really add up. So overall, I'd say having an EXP boon is generally a bad thing, because you're going to be taking a bane in a more important stat, most likely. And then having an EXP bane is generally a good thing, because you'll be getting a boon in a more impactful stat. And then finally, we have main skill chance, which I know this is a simplified guide where I'm trying to tell you guys everything and make it nice and easy for you, but skill procs are like the one thing in Pokemon Sleep that nobody has figured out yet. I haven't figured it out. The Pokemon Sleep Discord hasn't figured it out. The Pokemon Sleep Math Discord hasn't really figured it out. And it seems like the more people look into it, the more confusing it becomes. So having a boon in your main skill chance probably increases the odds of your Pokemon using their skill, and having a bane in it probably decreases the chance of them using their skill. But there really hasn't been an easily observed trend with that. I guess a little anecdote from me, aside from me tracking my gameplay for the past few weeks here, is I have a main skill chance decreased Houndour. And my Houndour, despite having a main skill down, gets its skill proc as often as anything else does in the game. In fact, I had one day with this Houndour that it procced its skill 3 times in one day. So, I don't know. If the skill procs in Pokemon Sleep have like a cooldown, and if your Pokemon has the opportunity to get it, then they kind of hold on to that until you open the game next, then I don't think you'd really ever realistically see an observable change based on this nature. Now, if it's affecting in a way where it's like every time you click to collect with a cooldown, you have a chance of proccing the main skill, well, then you could see a difference, but that difference should be more easily tracked, at least on my end, and it doesn't seem to be that way. So overall, I'd say, just like with EXP, Main skill chance as a nature effect is probably benign. Having it as a boon is probably negative because you're going to take a bane in something else. And having it as a bane is probably positive because you're going to be taking a boon in something else. The only caveat I'll make is for Pokemon that have the ingredient magnet skill, energy for everyone, or charge strength M. Those skills are pretty impactful for your Snorlax strength and for your team, so having those as a main skill chance bane probably isn't a good thing. You know, you might want to avoid that one. If your Pokemon that have that skill have a main skill chance bane, you might want to look for a new one. But at the end of the day, I'd say for most Pokemon, it's probably not that big of a deal. So to kind of recap here, if you have a speed of help or an ingredient finding boon, that's often a positive thing because those skills are directly impactful to your Pokemon's ability to score. And then having a EXP, energy, or main skill chance as a boon is often negative because they're not that impactful as boons, and then you'll be taking a bane, which could be a more impactful stat. Conversely, having EXP or main skill chance as a bane is often positive because you'll be getting a boon in another stat. With the exception of skill Pokemon probably not wanting the minus main skill chance. And then having speed of help or energy as a bane is often always negative because it's negatively impacting your Pokemon's frequency, which is probably the most important stat in Pokemon Sleep. And then finally, ingredient finding is often negative as a bane, unless you have a 2 to 3x berry Pokemon, in which case having minus the ingredient finding is a very positive thing. So if you've got like a adamant Pichu, for instance, that's probably one of the most optimized Pichu out there because it's going to be getting those Greppa berries, and the Greppa berries are going to keep coming in. And of course, you're probably not going to want to use this Pichu unless your Snorlax has a Greppa berry bonus. So here's a nice infographic kind of simplifying which natures you're looking for on which type of Pokemon. And as far as like the declarations here go, optimal is most optimal for the Pokemon. Chances are you're going to really want to have this kind of nature on your Pokemon. Good is definitely a cut above neutral. It's not quite as good as optimal is. Like, it's not like as good as having like a bunch of beneficial sub skills, for instance. But good is still really good for the Pokemon to have. Then we got very okay, which is like a slight cut above neutral. Like, I wouldn't lose my mind over getting these natures, but it's not a negative nature, so I'd be pretty happy about it. Then we got neutral, which is not a bad thing. In fact, it's kind of a good thing once again, because it's not a bad thing. And having it be a bad thing is bad. So neutral, overall, I'd say I'd be pretty pleased with having the neutral or better natures on the correct type of Pokemon. Then we have kinda bad. And kinda bad isn't really a deal breaker for the Pokemon, in my opinion. Like, you know, like if you've got like a Totodile, for instance, and it has minus speed of help. That's not great. But if it's your only Totodile, and you're on the Cyan Beach, or it's an Oranberry bonus week for the Snorlax, well, it's still probably going to be your breadwinner as far as points go, because it's still a double berry Pokemon on the berry bonus week for the Snorlax. So it's not a deal breaker, but it's definitely unideal. You'd probably want to keep one eye open while you're sleeping for another Totodile, right? But what is super bad is the deal breakers, and that's going to be the ingredient Pokemon having the minus ingredient skill, because they just don't collect ingredients. I mean, they technically do, but I only tracked that Bulbasaur for a week, and then I never used it again because it was so bad. So yeah, your ingredient Pokemon definitely don't want the minus ingredient natures. It's just no. Now, once again, to highlight, for the berry section, I have 2 to 3x berry, and that's because any Pokemon could become a double berry Pokemon if they have the berry finding S subskill. So if you got that subskill at like level 10 or level 25, well, then you could regard their nature as being beneficial either to what their like actual Pokemon type is, or you could refer to them as a berry type Pokemon. So they have a little bit more flexibility in that respect because of that subskill. And then as far as that subskill being like the best subskill in the game or something, I can't say that for certain yet because I haven't done a mathematical evaluation of all the different subskills in Pokemon Sleep. But if I had to wager right now, I'd definitely say that the berry finding S subskill is probably in the top 3 for sure. And if it's already a berry Pokemon with the Berry Finder as sub-skill, then that's probably the best sub-skill for it out there. But I'll do a video on sub-skills at a later date. If you're interested in checking it out, make sure to subscribe to SwagTips. And then finally, I do want to note that the Pokemon Sleep Math Cord has a podcast out there, link in the description, going over natures as well. I'd say a lot of the information that I have aligns with the information they have. They value certain aspects of nature a little bit more than I do, and they downplay some things that I find to be a lot more harsh. So there are some differences in our perspective there, but if you want to get their side of the story, link in the description to their video. So that's all I gotta say right now about Pokemon Sleep's natures. If you got any questions on this content, of course, comment below, let me know what's up, and I'll be happy to help you out. And if you enjoyed this kind of content, you want to see more like it, well, make sure to subscribe to SwagTips. SwagTips. I'd also like to give a special shout out to these Patreon supporters. If you want to support Swagman on Patreon, link in the description.